And yes. All right, the May 24th meeting of the Rent Control Board is hereby called to order. We have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Trosas.
Here.
Commissioner Flora.
Here.
Commissioner Foster.
Here.
And Commissioner Duran and Commissioner Phyllis are absent.
All right, let's stand for the pledge to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's fun. All right, let's take a look at the minutes for a moment and see if we can arrive at a consensus to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Any special agenda items or announcements from staff?
Yes, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We held a tenant seminar on May 15th. It was, the people who attended, it was a small group but very engaged. Their comments following this seminar were excellent. They thought the presentation was very clear and they learned a lot about the rent control law. So that was a very good tenant seminar. And our next seminar will be calculating the rent increase. And this year, we expect we may have more participation in that in light of the changes to the surcharge regulations and the limitations. Although we know it's not going to affect a lot of people, we think there will be additional questions about that. So that will be the evening of Tuesday, July 24th from 6:30 to 9. And we hope that anybody that's interested will contact the office and sign up for that. Because we provide individual help and we need to bring a printout for their property to be able to help them individually. So anybody interested in that should sign up with our office either through email or by calling us.
Thank you. Commissioner Flora?
Were you done, Tracy?
Yes.
And Dan, I'm glad you're here. We did start the practice, and I hope we continued it, of whether it's a crowd large or small, that we would videotape the meeting and make it available on our website.
We have taped some of them. We don't tape each one, but before Mr. Wessel retired, he took, I'm not sure which it was, maybe the owning rental property, and narrated it. So we have a very good narration, plus it's chaptered so that people can go directly to the subject that they're interested in. I'm not sure.
That was for the owners.
That was for the owners.
Okay.
Have we done that also with the tenant seminar, Dan?
I think all the seminars have some video.
So we videoed all of them. We
Yeah.
don't do it each time.
No, but I think doing it, in, if I may,
And making it available on the web.
If I may, my suggestion would be, I think maybe record, and I know this is also a budgetary item, but record, I think, as many as we need to get a good amount of what we're perceiving as the frequently asked questions, so that at least we can edit together maybe a single video from many forums that kind of capture your 10 to 12 more frequently asked questions would be my suggestion. Because some of them may start to look a little dated. Hairstyles may change in 20 years, but if we get a good amalgamation of several recordings into a nicely edited piece with most of your frequently asked questions, I think people would watch that and it probably could hold up for a few years.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Terosas.
Okay, I'm going to ask the same question I always do. Are we making sure that we're tweeting, Facebooking, social mediaing all of these events? I loved the way that we got out the word for our public hearings here, and I just want to make sure we're keeping up that practice as well.
Yeah, well, you'll see that in the goals for this coming year, we put that as one of our primary goals, was to continue that type of outreach. It was very effective with the surcharge discussion. So we are working with that. Dan is working with the Office of Communications. They do the primary tweeting, and so we are working with them to get the message out.
Great.
And we do intend to do that. And our database, our future rent tracking system will also give us some opportunities with that. And just today, Dan and I were talking about how do we gather more emails from tenants and everything. So we're very focused on that.
Are we on Instagram? Can we make that a goal as well?
If you want to talk, Dan, will you come to the mic?
No, it's okay. We can talk about it during the budget.
Well, he could join us.
Or you can join us.
More action photos
We
of
could
us
take
from the
some
dais.
pictures and like narrate. Trust me, all of the
Instagram stories.
There are a lot of like Instagram stories from government agencies just educating people of like know your rights type of stuff.
We have not been using Instagram much. I think we may have posted just the one thing when we were trying to drum up public interest in the surcharge regulations. It's difficult to find the right kind of message for the right channel. How do you
Maybe we need a social media intern, like a grad student intern. Just a thought. That they could be helpful for a low cost.
Yeah. Well, as you know, we are recruiting for an information coordinator. We're heading towards that final stage, and someone who has those social media skills would be welcome in the office for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Terosis. Are there any more announcements from staff?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you. We are ready for public comment. This is the time in our meeting where we set aside time for members of the public to speak to us on items that are in our purview but not on the agenda, and I don't have any requests to speak. All right, that closes public comment. Moving on to item 12A, administrative items. We're going to have a report from staff on fiscal year 2017-2018 third quarter budget report. Take it away, staff.
Okay. So really the main purpose of tonight's budget study session is to review the fiscal year 18-19 proposed budget, to answer any questions the board has, to receive directions on any changes you'd like us to consider, and then to set it for public hearing and adoption on Thursday, June 14th. Before we do that, it's always helpful to review the board's experience in the current fiscal year through the third quarter. And you received a mid-year fiscal report in February, so this is kind of just a very quick summary and updating as of now. This is a very informal meeting tonight. There are no decisions to be made, so we can talk, informally about this. I'll tell you what I have prepared here, but at any time you can stop me and say, we know that or whatever. So. Current projections show that by the year end, revenue will be approximately $60,000 higher than the $5,270,000 originally anticipated. The variation is due primarily to higher than anticipated registration fee collections of about $65,000 and lower than projected miscellaneous revenue of a little more than $5,500. It now appears that expenditures will be almost $413,000 less than the adopted expenditure budget of $5,182,000. The reduction is attributable primarily to the reduced expenditures for permanent employee costs of about $189,000, lower than anticipated PERS contributions of about $95,000, and not yet expending the funds for the new property and rent tracking database system that we will be implementing. The bottom line is that given the increased revenue collections and the overall reduced expenditures, we anticipate the originally projected small surplus of $89,000 will be increased to $563,000. The first payment to the city of about $49,000 for the PERS prepayment loan will be transferred to the city at the end of the fiscal year, leaving approximately $514,000 to be added to the board's fund balance. A significant portion of the savings this year is also attributable to funding for the replacement of the agency's legacy rent database. The budget originally included approximately $200,000 for fees associated with that, consultant fees, hardware and software that might be needed for the design and conversion of the legacy system to a new platform with enhanced features and capabilities. At mid-year, after gathering some information on potential system costs in response to our RFI, which we issued in September, and in consultation with other rent control jurisdictions, and upon seeing potential savings in the fiscal year 17-18 budget, we asked the board to allocate an additional $120,000 or to move it to that portion of the budget. Having received proposals now from 7 vendors, we see that the project will likely cost somewhere between $300,000 and $450,000 to implement. and the savings this year will be used in fiscal year 18-19 when the system implementation will actually occur. The third quarter budget report provides details on some line items in which we're projecting over expenditures and others in which we project reduced expenditures. Rather than detail those again, they are detailed in the written memo, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the third quarter report.
Wonderful. All right. Commissioner Flora.
Yes, thank you. I did read through the report, and the questions I'm going to ask, sort of, if it's not going to upset anybody too much, might sort of be useful to both item 12A and 12B. Okay. If you don't mind my just going ahead and asking, because they're somewhat maybe
Sure.
universal, or
They're
they might cross over.
By the way, how many budgets have you sat for now, Commissioner Flora?
Well, this will be my 8th and final. But I may come back and just speak in public comment in future years
That'd be
and just
nice.
ask for the
Otherwise
most
we'll
minutes
miss
you'll
you.
give me. No. Sorry, in no particular order. I was curious, and again, this bleeds over into a later budget question, so I'm sorry if I'm cheating a little bit, but the topic of as-needed employees was part of the third quarter budget report. I notice we use a lot of retirees, and if they're happy to do it and don't mind being unretired for a few hearings, more power to them. Who sets the rates? How are we determining how much they're paid? And
That's
is that
determined. The city has a policy that you pay the person the salary that the person in that position would receive. So they're
okay.
being paid the same salary as a hearing officer.
Okay, just not the health benefits and other costs.
Right, none of those other overhead costs.
Okay,
just
and that's not anything
straight
that was
salary.
was that something that was determined by the personnel commission, or is that just a board tradition?
It's a city tradition.
City tradition,
yeah.
okay.
So it's what we've done, and we are very fortunate to have this qualified, skilled group of people
Still
who are willing
around
to help us.
Yeah,
we're
emeritus
very
staff
fortunate.
is very valuable. I was just kind of curious. My other question was with regard to the new database, and I think I'm going to go ahead and reserve that question for our next item.
Okay.
But I really wanted to jump in on that because it really had piqued my interest in why I hadn't asked in 8 years. I don't know, but I was just curious who sets the rates. I mean, it's probably a bargain at twice the price,
Oh,
but
for the hearing officer.
yeah. Well, no, for the
database.
for the
Oh,
as
for the
needed
as-
employees. Yeah. Okay. So that was helpful. Thank you. I'll reserve, Madam Chair, the rest of my questions for 12B.
Okay. Commissioner Terosis?
Point of clarification, I assume that you're just paying them like an hourly rate per salary, but it's not a fully loaded cost with like salaries and employee benefits
That's
baked
correct.
in, right? So it would be cheaper.
That's correct. Once they're retired, is there a PERS portion? So there's a very small PERS retirement piece, not the same factor that is applied to permanent employees. But other than that, it is straight salary.
It actually
Great.
makes sense because they're still in PERS.
And then I don't know if this is like too personal, but since we aren't privy to all of the like staffing goings on the day-to-day basis, which I'll get to in the next item, this retired information analyst assisting the public information department as needed due to personnel changes in the department. What were the personnel changes? Like, is there a way for us to make sure that, I mean, because public information seems a lot different than hearings examiner. What was the situation? Do we need more staff? Were we able to recruit quickly enough? Like, I just want to make sure that we're not stretching ourselves too thin here.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. We had retirements, resignations, and promotions within the Public Information Department in the past year. Mr. Costello was the senior analyst whose position is now vacant. He was promoted when Neil Wessel retired. When the last we knew that there were 2 analysts that were going to retire. So even though one was not retiring until later, we hired 2 information coordinators at the same time, so that we would train 2 at the same time. One of them ended up resigning. So now we're recruiting to fill another information coordinator position. Once we have that position filled, we'll have 5 information coordinators. It's possible that we may, in the future, recommend adding people. We think that the database system, with its workflows and increased efficiencies, will reduce some of that work. But the information coordinators and analysts are the heart of the agency in terms of answering questions and dealing with the public. So we're always watching that. Again, we're fortunate to have a retired analyst who's willing to come back and help us when we need him to. And so we have used him this year. Once we have the new information coordinator on staff and trained, there's a training period to learn the law. So we anticipate we'll need to continue to use him. But eventually we'll have 5 trained information coordinators or analysts, and we think that will be sufficient. If not, we will come back and ask you.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I obviously agree with that. I think that we are a public-facing agency, and I feel like having really good information coordinators is very important to me personally. But then also is, I mean, again, not that you're going to tell us, but I just want to make sure that there's not anything happening where these people are resigning and there's, you know, anything we could potentially do about that.
No, I mean, most people retire; they don't resign.
Yeah, no, that's
this
odd
was a
to me.
unique. This was a unique situation that occurred. That
she
wasn't with us very long, but we have been very fortunate with the people we've recruited. We have some excellent people.
And how long? What's the average recruitment period from start to finish? Because I know that it's sometimes challenging and takes a while. Is there anything we can do to expedite that?
Yeah, we use the city's personnel department to help us with the recruitment. There was what I considered an unreasonable delay in initiating this recruitment. Mr. Costello asked for the initiation of that process, and it took perhaps 6 weeks or more before anything was issued. And we expressed our frustration. The city's, the personnel department recruits for everybody, so we don't have control over that, but that was frustrating. It's not always that way. I'll tell you, years ago, it was much worse. It's been much better in recent years. This, I think, was somewhat of an exception. It was a frustration, but they did the oral interviews yesterday,
okay, good.
So we're getting really close.
Great, thanks.
And I just wanted to finish off by saying, and I think Commissioner Flora was correct, a lot of this goes from one to the other. So a couple line items. For question for council on the legal expenses going over, just for frame of reference for the public, can you talk about your use of your line item in the budget in years past and how it compares to this one, what I would say is an outlier?
Yes, we do almost all of our legal work in-house. This is the first time in my tenure as the board's general counsel that we've used outside counsel for anything. We're using outside counsel for one litigation matter. In past years, we've budgeted tens of thousands of dollars just to do responsible budgeting and have used almost nothing. This year we've gone over, still looking back in the aggregate, we're still way ahead in savings. But it is just the nature of litigation that you can't predict with 100% accuracy what's going to happen in the case. We did the best we could to budget what we thought the litigation would take, but motions occur and various procedures happen that aren't necessarily anticipated. That case is now concluded at the trial phase and is now in the appellate phase, and that is much more predictable because we're not having hearings and that sort of thing. So I anticipate that, notwithstanding the fact that we went beyond what we expected to spend in this 1 year, we're likely to be closer to our target next year. And then when this case goes away, it's my anticipation, of course I can't predict this for sure, but it's my anticipation that we'll just go back to doing 100% of our cases in-house as we have traditionally done.
Thank you very much. Satisfactory explanation for me, and your departments to be commended. So speaking of commendations, and we'll get to this again in the next item, but just to wrap this up, I think it's worth noting for the public and for our constituents and our all of the groups that have an interest in rent control in this town, that this budget is so accurate. As a business owner, and many of you are business owners out there, maybe you're accountants who work for other companies, to have a budget come in this much on target year after year after year is a real testament to your staff. Lima just does an amazing, incredible job of taking That's why this agency is so amazing to work with, because it's finite, it's transparent, it's clear, it's equitable, and it's just so wonderful and gratifying to be able to work with you guys. And when everything is this straightforward, and we're really grasping at straws when we nitpick something, and we hope you know that. And we just wanted to give you guys all just a tremendous bravo and thank you for being so clear, straightforward, and accurate. It makes everybody's job a lot easier, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much for those comments. I really appreciate it. And I also want to acknowledge Lima. She does a fabulous job working on this. Lima does so many different things for the agency, and this budget is just one piece of it. But you can imagine what's required in terms of monitoring all of this and gathering all this information. She does a really phenomenal job, and Lonnie has helped her recently with that. So I want to also thank Lonnie, because he's helped a lot in the last couple of years with a lot of the whatever Lima can ask him to help her with, she's asking. So he's done a big part of it too. The two of them are really phenomenal with this. So thank you for acknowledging that.
All right, well, that concludes discussion on the informational presentation of the 2017-2018 third quarter budget report. We're moving on to item 12B, presentation of fiscal year 2018-2019 proposed operating budget. This is purely informational and question and little discussion, and then there will be a public hearing on this at a future meeting.
Right. So again, this is an informal review of the budget. Feel free to stop me as we go along. The board received the memo that goes along with the budget that highlights some of the specific points. That's also available to the public. But I will go into some detail about it unless you stop me and say we don't need to hear that. So the rent control law provides that before July 1st of each year, the board must hold a public hearing and adopt an annual budget for the upcoming fiscal year. To finance the board's reasonable and necessary expenses, the board may charge landlords an annual registration fee, and owners may pass through half of that fee to tenants as a monthly surcharge on the rent. Excuse me. The proposed budget represents our best estimate of the board's revenue and expenses for the coming year. Because the budget predicts future events, it's an educated prediction, but as always, we strive to be as accurate as possible. The proposed operating budget projects expenditures of $5,241,000 and revenue of approximately $5,286,000, resulting in a small surplus excuse me, of $44,681, or essentially a balanced budget. Like last year, the budget is based upon a $198 per unit annual registration fee, and we're not recommending a change in the fee this year. The upcoming year is going to be one of change for the agency. We anticipate that up to 4 staff members will retire and their replacements will be hired. Because we're not certain when those retirements will occur, we've budgeted for existing staff members through the fiscal year, as well as staff members. As new staff members will likely be hired at lower entry-level salaries, there will be funds available to provide for short periods of overlap between retiring employees and their replacements for training and transition purposes. The budget also includes funds for costs associated with employee retirements. I forgot to use the PowerPoint presentation here, so let me move ahead. That was about the third quarter, all the details, but
There it is.
okay. This year, in addition to our traditional operating expenditures, we're also going to have a couple of non-operating expenditures. One of those expenses is attributable to the new property and rent tracking database system we expect to implement this year. It will replace our legacy rent system, which has served us well since the 1980s, but is due for replacement and upgrading. To replace the rent database, the board will fund a significant capital improvement project. This project will have one-time costs for design, development, conversion, and implementation, and then will have ongoing licensing and maintenance costs in the future years. While this project was funded last year or in the current year, we are just now reviewing the proposals vendors submitted this month, and we will come to you for approval of a contract and vendor once they are selected, and we expect the project development and implementation to occur this coming year. I'll talk more about the project in a couple of minutes. The board has another non-operating expense this coming year, and that's the second annual payment on the loan the city gave the board to accelerate paying down the agency's unfunded pension liability. While the loan is a liability, we've already seen the benefit of this prepayment. The resulting adjusted PERS factor saved the agency approximately $40,000 in PERS costs in fiscal year 17-18, and the revised factor for fiscal year 18-19 will result in reductions of approximately $70,000 in PERS costs. Before we look at the budget itself, I want to mention a couple of things about agency staffing levels and review the goals we're proposing for fiscal year 18-19. We've already talked really about the as-needed assistance, which we know we will need going forward. But in a service organization like the Rent Control Agency, our major resources are the people who provide services to the community and advise the board. This coming year, we will have 25 positions, one less than the current year, as we're deleting the vacant senior admin analyst position that we just talked about. With the addition of the hearing officer position last year, we had anticipated in a reduction of the use of retired agency employees as needed as hearing officers. But as we've talked about, due to the petition filings and the complexity of some of the cases, we've continued to need their services. And given that a number of the retirements that are anticipated will occur in the hearings department, we know we're going to need to continue to use as-needed hearing officers in the coming year. We've allocated close to $52,000 to cover the costs of these as-needed employees. The next few slides show the agency's goals for the coming year, and we've listed broad agency-wide priorities that are supplemented then by some objectives we want to pursue to achieve these goals. I'm going to mention just a few. Under the first goal, increasing efficiencies through the use of technology, we have two major priorities. First is ensuring effective communication with constituents through public outreach, including social media campaigns. Our recent experience with the expanded outreach effort related to the board's work on the surcharge issue has shown us how effective that can be, and we look forward to doing this in the future. The second part of this priority, improving the user experience with the Rent Control website, will be facilitated by our second priority in this area, which is replacement of the rent database. As I said, it's been with us since the 1980s, and replacing the functionality of the existing system will be our first step in this project. But we also are looking for this project to offer some significant enhancements that are not part of the current database. We're going to improve efficiencies and the user experience through electronic workflows, improved reporting capabilities, data exchange with other applications, a web-based self-serve portal for landlords and tenants, contact management and tracking, improved access to property-specific documents, and case management for petitions and applications, including noticing of parties. So there are a lot of components to the database. It may be, as I said, the first step will be replacing the functionality of the existing system. And realistically, this may be a phased project where we will hopefully, if all goes well, we can get it all in place in the coming year, but some of the implementation may occur in future years as well. As I mentioned in the third quarter report for fiscal year 17-18, we're carrying over funds that we will use for this one-time development and implementation of this project. New systems require staff training, so we've also noted that as a goal, not only will staff members be trained in the replacement system, we're committing to training staff on any new system that the city implements, including Office 365. And we've started some use of Office 365, and it, I think, is going to need a lot of training. So thankfully, the city is offering that training. The second major goal area is ensuring compliance with the rent control law. In this ever-important goal, we will communicate with tenants and owners about changes in the law, including the recently adopted limitations on pass-through of property-related tax assessments. And to ensure that owners properly notify tenants of these changes, we'll be assisting owners with completing the notice of change in terms of tenancy form and looking for some tools that would be useful to them as well, like potentially a calculator on the website and things that could be tools to help facilitate. We'll also be planning for any possible changes in state laws that might impact Santa Monica's rent control law. These could be amendments to the Ellis Act, changes in the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, or changes in eviction procedures and timelines, to name just a few. We'll also continue to initiate civil actions as necessary to enforce compliance with the law and pursue unpaid registration fee balances through collection activities. The next goal is to continue our collaboration with other city departments on common goals. A key goal for this year will be continuing to collaborate with the Code Enforcement, Building and Safety, and the City Attorney's Office to ensure property owners and tenants understand their rights, responsibilities, and obligations related to construction work in occupied properties. We've been working with Code Enforcement and Building and Safety this year as they're considering revisions to the tenant protection parts of the municipal code. We're expecting them to come to our next meeting to give us an update on what they're doing and the ideas that they have, and then they'll be going to council later this summer for implementation of those for consideration of those changes. And the city is always looking for ways to improve sustainability and conserve energy, and when they do that, they often consult with us for information that we have about multifamily rental housing, including rent levels and other data that we have. So we'll continue those collaborations as well. Finally, as I've mentioned, we are anticipating staff changes this year. We've already had some, but they will continue, I think, in the upcoming years. And this means we will focus on cross-training of existing staff and effective succession planning that will be paramount to success as these changes occur. And while we hate to lose valued staff members, in at least one case, the change may also represent an opportunity. One of the people thinking of retiring is the person who maintains the rent database, and will have the chance to identify new skills required to maintain the new property and rent tracking system when we recruit for his replacement. He's going to stay with us through the point that we need him to get this project in place, but he's been thinking about retiring for a couple of years. So he said, he'd like to retire, but he's committed to seeing at least the conversion of the existing database through. So, as I said, there may be different needs for maintaining the database in the future, or the system in the future, and that gives us somewhat of an opportunity. These changes will also demand that we put into place effective orientation and training for the new staff members, and that will be part of our goals. So we welcome your suggestions and comments on the goals, and also hope to hear from the public on this topic.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Commissioner
Do you want
Flora.
to talk about the budget dollars or no?
No, I mean, yeah, since we're going to have a public hearing, I think we just wanted to have some broad discussion among the three of us, and there's only three of us, and it's not the public hearing. And so I think we just had some preliminary questions, and we'll see if any of the commissioners have any directions or changes, not anticipated, but if they would, that'd be about the only thing we'd be doing tonight other than discussion.
Yeah.
Commissioner Flora.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. But I do hope the discussion tonight moves us forward to, I think, a more well-educated discussion in June, at least among the three of us and whatever we can impart. I have a couple of administrative questions and then a few budgetary, monetary questions. I'll try to be quick, but I first want to say that I'm really glad to see that the staff, we're fortunate enough to have the leadership with Tracy and the department heads that knows that succession planning is really important. Just a personal vent here. I work for a family business where nobody thinks anyone's going to die, and we have no succession planning. And when I bring it up, I'm the bad guy. So it really makes me feel a lot better that we are seeing the need for that in advance. Any good organization's got to have the realistic expectation of that. And I'm not pointing to anyone in particular here, but I know she will at some point want to retire, or she's going to be poached to be like the GM of like a professional sports team because she can make the numbers work so well with salary caps and stuff. But if Miss Noseworthy is one of those people, I certainly hope in the coming years, say 10 years from now, I certainly hope that she's mentoring somebody else or multiple other people who can be as incredible on the budget as she has been for many years. My compliments, Lima. You've been really amazing. Old formula, new formula, budget after budget. You've been amazing, and I really appreciate it. So I just hope that there's going to be a promising mentee out there. And with regard to the new rent database, wouldn't multiple people be trained on it so that we wouldn't have to worry about just one person? And there's succession planning, but then there's also redundancy and backup.
Well,
is this
likely,
going to, yeah.
with the new system, there will likely be support from the vendor that produces the system for us. There will be some ongoing support from them. We are spoiled in that we have had an on-site person who has been available to us to deal with any issues related to our technology. It's hard for me to consider giving that up. As I mentioned, I anticipate that we will hire somebody with the expertise to continue to see the new system forward, and work with any issues that arise. We're also working more closely with the city's information systems department than we had in the past. We've always had our own database. We've always had a lot of independence from them, but we realize there's a lot of expertise there that we cannot duplicate in our office. Our focus is rent control. The technology helps us do the rent control, but our focus is not the technology itself, whereas we have a whole city department that's committed to that. And they're much more committed to working with the departments under the new director. And so we have a project manager from ISD who's working with us on this project. And we're talking about, can there be backup and information systems department?
Thank you.
And can there be backup and somebody on their staff that would also know how to work with the systems?
Yeah.
So we realize we need redundancy in expertise related to the database.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a lot more opportunity with that with the new system than we do with our current.
And that leads to my next question, which gets a little bit into the budgetary, but this is still more of an administrative question, or maybe even a suggestion if you're not light years ahead of me already. I don't think we probably work with an RFP consultant, but are we pulling in some expertise from other parts of the city, IT, ISD folks, to help guide you on what types of questions we should be asking of these vendors in the interview? So that it helps us figure out who's telling us the best truth for us. You know what I'm saying? Right. When you're comparing apples to apples, who's going to be the best buyer?
Yeah. Al Dave, the person from ISD who's working with us, he does this all the time. He works on a variety of different departments. He looks at RFPs a lot. So he has helped us through that process, as well as the purchasing department, procurement. They have helped us. We don't do many RFPs like this, so this is unique for us. As well, the technology committee subcommittee has helped us. Carolyn and Nicole, we met with them. Carolyn has some experience with this, so she also can be helpful with, just looking at the proposals. But yeah, we recognize that we need some assistance with this. The RFP, as I said, was issued. We received 7 responses.
Which is great, yeah. 2
of them are out of the ballpark for us. It's just not realistic. But the other 5, they have, like I'm sure with every response to a request for proposals, they have pluses and minuses. They have good things and bad things. Some of them are really, I wouldn't say any of them are really clear about how they would do our system, but that's what we want. The presentations will give us some guidance on that. We're working on an agenda for the types of questions we'll ask when they do the presentations. There will be unique questions to different vendors depending upon the proposal that they submitted, but there will be some other general questions. So yeah, we're getting help. Lima is a key partner in this as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Lima.
Only that, as Tracy had mentioned, Al Dave has been working with us. He's been sitting in on the demonstrations. He meets with us regularly. And when we have the next round of people that we want to see another demonstration, he will be sitting in with us as well. So he gets to ask the more technical questions and how it relates to the city systems and all of that. So there was a lot of support there.
Right.
Also, in all of these systems, when you said training more than one person, there's all the level of users, as super users, you know, there's the people who just use it, they want to get in, they want to get out. There will be also a group of users who have higher capabilities that can do maybe modest changes or run the modest report.
Right.
So those people will be trained to do slightly higher level tasks than the core person who is more of the programmer, analyst, and not so much
Yeah.
coding, but to do the heavy work.
Great.
So there will be several levels of people trained in the system to do certain tasks.
And I asked the question because I really was just trying to make sure that our knowledge of how to use this thing wasn't, affected by someone wanting to retire on a whim and they were the only person that really knew the passwords or something that simple. Madam Chair, if you can indulge me just a couple more questions. And one suggestion, and again, if you're not already light years ahead of me, you all have been working with RFPs for years as I have. I would just say that one thing I would be certain to ask about and to really make sure is included in any final agreement with the selected vendor, and that is a good, affordable maintenance agreement, not just a warranty, but where this isn't nickel and diming us to death on follow-up services, particularly in the first few years of working with the system, where they show a commitment without bleeding us dry on updates, on training, and working out kinks. A maintenance agreement can really, this is, it's like car dealerships. They don't really make the money selling the cars. They make the money in the service department. I would just make sure you put a check on that service department to make sure it's a reasonable price for onboarding us onto that system. Okay, two more. Real quick. I want to think that when we talked about the loan we got from the city to pay down the PERS, we seem to have figured out that it was worth not paying in advance even if we had the means, that it wasn't going to make that much of a difference. Is that because it's a fairly low interest loan? Can you remind me?
Yeah, it's a 1.3% interest,
Right.
so it's very low. But, if we have savings in any year, this year we have this capital improvement project that we're going to invest in, but the board can prepay any portion of the loan that
Right.
we would like to at any time. So
Yeah,
you have within the budget the page that we included a page that shows what the annual payments are, and both of the first and second year's payments are being covered essentially by savings in the reduced PERS costs. But yeah, that's why we opted for the 10 years, because the interest rate was so
I remember
reasonable.
this now. Yeah.
No,
No.
I wasn't recommending it this year because we have the big capital
Yeah.
improvement.
And I was
project.
just going to say I like paying down debt. I don't like debt, especially when the interest rate's more than I'm getting by not paying down the debt. And I just would say to my colleagues, it doesn't sound like it's a time that even if we come up with the surplus that's projected, it would probably be the right time to pay down in advance. But if future surpluses start bringing out
Right.
critique that we're storing up too much money, in addition to any rebates we want to give on fees, I certainly would recommend paying down debt when my colleagues have the opportunity in the future when I'm gone.
Yeah. So we laid out
When I'm
the
done.
payments on page 22 of the
Yeah.
budget for the PERS loan.
Yeah, great. And then finally, the most predictable question from me is workers' comp. It's staggering. If you round up, it's actually 2% of our budget, which is not a lot, but when you consider that that's just for insurance for injury, money that could obviously be used elsewhere. Did I ask last year when this sticker shock hit us, because you're just going to have to remind me, because I'm asking it again, why don't we shop for our own workers' comp
Right.
plan and stick with the city with police officers, firefighters, people that are going out and doing inspections on construction sites?
Well, a significant portion of our increase in the of the workers' comp costs is attributable to our experience. So we have had in the last, right now they're this dollar amount reflects injuries to at least a quarter of our employees.
Of our own employees.
Of our own employees. Yeah, we've had repetitive motion injuries and a variety of injuries. So a part of this increase, you notice this year it's about less than a 10% increase over last year. The big increase was last year.
Right.
And it reflects our experience as well as some increase in costs related to administering the program. The city is self-funded for workers' comp. I think I mentioned last year that Big Blue Bus is going out and doing a pilot program, and so they now are working with a outside administrator for the program to see whether that will provide any savings for them as compared to the city funding the program. It's a 3-year pilot. They're only in the first year. I think it's worth us watching that and seeing, but we are such a small agency with just 25 employees that I think finding somebody to administer a program for us might not be much less expensive.
Much cost benefit, yeah.
Right. Lima knows much more about workers' comp than I have. She's been working on gathering some information about this, so I'm going to let her add into that as well.
Sure. And before you respond, I just want to also ask, I'm assuming that we are taking preventative steps.
Yes. Absolutely.
Watching people's ergonomics, doing what we can to make them
right.
comfortable.
Yeah, the city has a risk management department. We ask them to come over whenever anybody is feeling some, need. We've invested in some sit and stand desks and some other things that have been needed by people. So, yeah, we are looking at the ergonomics of things as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your indulgences. I will take
Did you want to
Lima's responses and turn off my mic and conclude my questions for now. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I had a discussion just this afternoon actually with someone in risk management, and workers' comp is a lot of the rules is state rules, and so even if we were to go out to another company and just be our own little group, the costs associated with the injuries, that's what's driving our portion of the cost. So even if we were with another, just by ourselves, with the injuries that we've had and the cost of those injuries, our costs would be about the same, because the costs for the doctor, the costs for treatment are what they are. So it was explained to me that even if we were to find someone who would take us on and administer it, the administration cost would be some chunk of money. However, until we can get past injuries, the cost won't go down. And the cost that you see in the budget are based on 5 years experience. So as claims drop off, if there are no future claims, eventually the number will stabilize again. But as new claims come on, those now are carried for another 5 years. So it kind of becomes this perpetual cycle. And the initial jump from that 14,000 to the 94,000 was our 5-year cost went from $30,000 to $163,000. That was the big jump.
Thank you, Lima. Thank you, Commissioner Flora. Commissioner Terosis.
Yeah. Before I get into my questions, is there any way that we can impose or institute some sort of like risk management plan? Because it sounds like it's the actual injuries that are costing us the most money. Like, how do we ensure that we're mitigating our injuries to the extent feasible?
Well, we
like,
do.
Is there, like trainings and stuff like that?
Yeah, or really we've had people from risk management come over and assess the workstations and see what people need in terms of ergonomic equipment or whatever. So they're the experts on that, and they offer guidance. I don't know that they offer courses, but we can look into whether they...
Yeah, I don't know, like, if there's a training on how you... Like, again, not to sound like a broken record, we've definitely had to do these at work. Because workers' comp is a big expense. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the data shows as to whether or not they're successful. I also don't know if it's due to just having an aging workforce and that's what happens. So, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, it's a large expense, and thanks, Todd, for pointing out it's 2%. That's a lot, and to the extent we can minimize it, sounds good.
Yeah, we can look into whether there are classes that would be helpful.
I don't know.
We'll look into it.
If it is helpful. Okay, I wanted to comment on our goals.
Okay.
So these look great. I'm wondering if we should have something in here about commitment or dedication, something to that effect, to excellent customer service. I didn't really see anything in here about like customer/constituent service. I think not to lose sight of the fact, yes, we're up here setting policy, but I mean, this is a small part of what's happening on day in and day out. You know, we are serving the public, and I think that making sure that we're kind of tracking how we're doing in that regard. I don't know if we have surveys that we give our customers after they come in, or if there's someone who's accessed our services online, if we ask them to complete a survey and if we can track it in that regard. And part and parcel to that, I think, is commitment to professional development. So I don't know if that could be like a potential goal area, but when I looked at the amount of money for training, I actually thought it was really, really low. I personally think that professional development is really important. I think that morale of staff is really important. I think when staff feels that they've been invested in it, there's some growth potential and potential to develop with an agency. That's really important. At least it would be to me. And not only management training, but training on you know, day to day on how to you know, do the job and serve the public. I think all of that is important. So I actually would be supportive of increasing the training budget.
Yeah, we can definitely add commitment to excellent public service.
You don't have. I'm saying it for the record. I think it's important.
Well, absolutely. In my comments, that was one of the things that I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is, you know, we are absolutely committed
Right.
to providing the highest level of service possible. We never have a machine answer our front phone.
No,
you know,
no. And of course I know.
These are basic things. But one of the reasons that we do not have really high training costs, in part, is the city attorney's office offers a lot of training for the continuing education credits that
Sure.
the lawyers use.
Sure.
And in recent years, they've taken advantage of that. Recognizing that employees throughout the city could benefit from training, the city developed Santa Monica Institute.
Oh, great. Okay.
So it's a program. They offer regular classes and training sessions. They offer a management level training class. They offer a pre-supervisory class. We encourage our employees to take advantage of those opportunities as well. So that's something that the city developed over the last 3 to 5 years, I think, and they're continually adding to that. So a number of people have taken those courses and found them very helpful. We also attend conferences. So part of the there are other line items that cover some other types of travel and training that goes on at workshops and things. But we are committed to professional development.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, I obviously know that the attorneys are one thing, but I mean, I was thinking more like training for public speaking, for writing. Sure, I'm sure there is. You know, of course, like I don't know if you guys have ever done like Franklin Covey 7 Habits. Maybe that's really lame.
I did that once.
Okay, I mean, again, I'm not
saying
saying that you should spend money on things if there are already trainings offered out there, but I think it's important for especially even for succession planning to have that in place. So great, I'm glad that that's happening. Also, I don't know if this is so much a goal as something or just something that I would be interested in seeing, but I would like us to like track our metrics a little bit. I know we're doing a really good job of that already, but in terms of at the beginning of each meeting when you give the update on what's been going on, I'm kind of interested in knowing like how many cases we had this month, or how many calls. I don't know how we're tracking like the actual workload that we're doing, because I know that we're tracking it in our annual report, but is there a way, because I feel like when I'm reading this narrative and we're talking about things like staffing, or we're talking about things like, you know, the workload, I don't think I know that month to month.
Right. Well, we could certainly do that. We maintain something that we call performance indicators, and those include all of the filings, the petition filings that occur in a given month, all of the contact that the information coordinators and analysts have with the public, registration fees paid, just a whole variety of things across the agency. So if the board is interested, I could make that part of the special agenda items to give you a little bit of a sense of what was filed, like since the last meeting. Ellis withdrawals. Yeah. We had not had a lot of Ellis withdrawals this year. We've received a few in the last, we've now maybe I think had 7. primarily small properties, 1, 2, 3 unit properties. But we can give you that information as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, even
and I
if
think
it's not a verbal report, even if we had it in the
Just a
public
writing.
record as
Uh-huh.
like a memo or something to that effect, and you could just give us a high level summary, I definitely think like construction decrease petitions, Ellis activity, even just like calls. I think that people don't know the amount of work that goes on here. And I certainly don't think I do.
yeah.
On
Well,
a
maybe
daily
a
basis.
written memo
Yeah.
is a good idea.
I mean,
We can
again, just like
incorporate
just
that.
the metro, like a dashboard. It doesn't even have to be like a memo.
Well, that's the other thing. The
Yeah.
new system, I
Right,
think, will
right.
also be able to do a lot of that for us, which we don't have that capability now. But dashboards with that type of reporting is certainly part of what the new system will entail. But we do these performance indicators monthly, so we could certainly
so great.
monthly provide you with the information for the previous month. Takes us a little while to get them together. Not everybody's immediately has them. But we will we'll do that for you.
Thank you. And also, in case you can't tell, I'm just obsessed with data, so sorry about that. But I think it's important for all of us to make our decisions. I guess I totally hear Steven's explanation about the legal expenses. There's nothing that we can really do about it, but that just really seems high, and I just want to voice my concern. But again, I know that there's kind of nothing we can do because we have to see this through. I don't know that I have. Oh yeah, I thought the advertising budget seemed low as well. What exactly do we advertise, and should we be advertising more, or do we try to get earned media instead of paid media?
Well, we are required to advertise some public notices. So we advertise those in the Santa Monica Daily Press. We did a little bit more advertising related to the surcharge. That was not, we were looking to gather information, so we did that. There are other, for recruitments, we're going to have to do some advertising for recruitments.
Where do we advertise?
Regulations. Well, the public notices we do in the Daily Press. The Human Resources works with us in terms of advertising. The last time we recruited for hearing officers, they recommended Indeed. I don't think we pay for that, but I don't think
I
we
feel
pay
like
for
the
it. But
Daily
it was very
Journal.
effective.
I don't even know. I
we
think
also
like that
use
would
the
be more
Daily
effective.
Journal.
Okay.
When we're recruiting for legal
okay,
or
okay.
hearing officers, we use the Daily Journal, and that's also effective. For information coordinators, I think we used Indeed, and we also did some paid advertisements.
Okay, I'm fine with that. And then I don't know how much. It doesn't sound like we've gotten to the negotiation stage yet regarding the database, but I don't know if we have this many proposals, and some of them seem to be really high. I feel like, are we going to try to get them to come down a little? Are we going to negotiate with these people, or we're just going to have to accept what they told us?
Well, the two that are kind of out of the ballpark, we were not really
worth it, yeah.
considering pursuing. The others are kind of all within a range. Some of them are less expensive, some of them a little bit more. It's kind of between the implementation costs between $200,000 and $450,000. So there's a big range. We'll try and figure out. We need to evaluate the proposals in a very systematic approach. No, we have not gotten to the negotiation stage. When we get there, there may be some room for, reduced things. We have a lot of intellectual property that we can contribute to this process. If it's a developer who has intentions of going to other rent control jurisdictions and trying to implement a similar thing, we might be able to negotiate something around the information we can provide. But we're not at that stage yet. We will be looking for what savings we can, but it is a significant project.
Yeah,
with
no,
capital
I
investment.
agree. I had made a note about Todd's point as well, that ongoing maintenance and updating of the system really can be very pricey. So I want to make sure that we negotiate that up front. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then,
we asked for those costs as well. So
great. And also the fact that this is that expensive. I mean, I guess we'd have to do it, but it just seems so high. Yeah, I would like to see, I wish it were less. I hope that we find someone who's committed to really understanding our process, because I think that when you have a developer who really understands our process, that can really make a big difference. So I'm happy to help if it would be helpful.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I did want to mention one thing that I didn't get to, and Do you
Okay.
want to go first, Anastasia? Or
No, that's fine. I'm going to chime in,
just-
but if you've got something to add, please do. I
on the
didn't mean
budget
to.
page, which is the first page behind the tag, you all have the budget page. So you'll notice that on the other costs line, this year coming up, we're projecting $42,700. That's because we've put in about $35,000 for the election costs. There will be 3 rent board seats to be filled in this election. Yes, 3. And so that varies. The cost varies. It depends upon whether the school district has to run an election or not, and what other measures are on the ballot. So we've put in 35,000. It could be more, it could be less, but that's a pretty big increase compared to this year's for other costs. The other things in that line are cable TV for the coverage of board meetings.
The extra meetings.
Yeah, and we had a couple extra this year, but it's not, prohibitively expensive.
Okay. And I apologize for not letting you finish that earlier. I won't try to add too much to what I agree very much with all of the points that both Commissioner Flora and Commissioner Trosas have already made. I love the idea of what was the proposal? Dashboard? Yeah, the dashboard and highlighting for the public and for our constituents and our viewing audience what our agency does. I've also proposed to this body that members of the board spend time in the office. This is something that I've done, and it was incredibly helpful to meet every single employee in the agency more than once, and to sit with each of them for 5 or 10 minutes and talk about the stacks of paper in front of them and what the files are and what. I mean, I learned an incredible amount about what each staff member does and what each department does. And I think if you're a board that's going to oversee these people and make decisions about their budgets, that you should understand what it is they do. So I hope that everybody will make themselves available at some point in the future.
So I think it's a good idea to give you the numbers, but let me tell you, the numbers do not represent the work behind those numbers. We have spent hours and hours and hours mediating some construction-related decrease petitions, and we didn't even have petitions filed in that case. We're now getting petitions filed, and it will be going forward to a hearing. But hours and hours and hours were spent on that project by the mediator, staff people, information analysts. So the numbers are one thing, but it doesn't really reflect all the work behind
I think,
the numbers.
well, at least for my part, and this may or may not be what Commissioner Trosas was looking for, but sometimes if we as a board have to wait till the end of the year and then 4 months after that to hear what the numbers were from 15 months before that, even though it's not truly representative of everything everybody obviously does every day, I still think it'd be helpful, even if it was monthly or quarterly or something, to have a more periodic, so we can see if there's an uptick in a certain area. It might inspire a board discussion item or an administrative item, to address things in a more timely fashion. So at least for my part, that's what I took from that proposal.
Sure.
What, if anything, we didn't talk about our deficit. What, if anything, do you see this next? We had about $89,000 left over. Not the database allocation notwithstanding, and then your projected budget for 18-19. Do you want to articulate what impact, if any, to our deficit reduction plan or anything is included in that?
Well, this year, at the end of 17-18, we'll be able to put about $89,000 back into the reserve fund. And after, 500,000, but then 425 of that
Spoken
we're sort
for.
of
Yeah.
allocating to the database project, right? This is more summarized on page 21.
I
We
just wanted
put
you
a
to
new
highlight
thing
it.
in,
Yeah, 21.
Yeah, page 21.
Okay.
So we're starting off fiscal year 17-18. We started this year with about $1,256,000. We're going to add $514,000 into that this year. No, I'm sorry, I didn't. Well, on this at the very bottom.
So I was just thinking for the benefit of the public, we can all see it.
Yeah, I didn't put this up. I'm sorry. Then, after the projected expenditures for fiscal year 18-19, we expect to be able to put another $44,681 back into the reserve. So what we were showing here is we are anticipating somewhere around 400 or 425,000 to the database project and 50,000 approximately again to the next payment on the PERS loan. But we will then be at the end of next year with a reserve sufficient to cover the 10 to 15% of the budget plus the accrued vacation or leave time that we need to have funds to cover that. So we will be able to continue to maintain a balance sufficient to do that.
Thank you. And about the database, so for me, when I was listening to both of you talk about workplace injuries and the database, they kind of met in the middle for me on another item. I would hope that in the line of questioning and evaluation or point system, whatever it is you're going to evaluate these RFPs by, that it include a component that considers repetitive motion injuries when looking at implementation of a database and how it's going to be used by staff on a day-to-day basis. I think since we know this is such a significant problem for us, a quarter of our workforce is afflicted, then we should be considering how much data entry, how many repetitive categories. So let's I would advise including that as a factor when you're interviewing.
Yeah, that's something we can look at and consider. One of the real advantages of a workflow, we now have owners filing the vacancy registration forms online. So once we have our workflow in place, they're essentially doing the data entry. They're putting in their information. We're going to verify it. It's going to go through this workflow, and then it's going to be loaded into the database. And that's with our existing system. So that will really reduce the amount of data entry that person is currently required to do. And we'll look for those other types of efficiencies that the new system will provide.
And because I spent time in the office, I met that employee, and I saw these stacks of tear off, duplication sheets that she gets from the forms that get sent in, and yes, so that will be.
We would ask all owners to please use the online filing of the vacancy registration forms, and all of those people in the industry who can influence the other people in the industry, please encourage them to use the online filing. It also will result in the system being updated more quickly, and they'll be able to see those updated rents on our webpage more quickly. So please use the online filing.
Thank you. And I would like to know, maybe at a future time, how our repetitive motion injuries compare to that of the rest of city staff, just to see if we differ from them significantly one way or the other in any particular way. And that's all I have.
Non-public safety, right?
Repetitive motion, yeah.
You mean city staff here, non-public safety?
Yes. Similar category staff.
We can try and get that information, yes.
All right, great. Well, since this was just an informational item, we will wrap up this discussion, and we will proceed to our last item on the agenda, which is a board discussion item brought forward by me. Item 14A reads, Chairperson Foster would like the board to consider adopting a resolution urging City Council to support increased funding of the Preserve Our Diversity Rent Subsidy Program in order to assist additional severely rent-burdened seniors so that they may remain living in their rent-controlled units with dignity and with some measure of security. So for months, I've personally been tracking the Housing Commission's efforts to successfully, and they've done it, they've established the Preserve Our Diversity program. I also participated and supported measures GS and GSH to raise those funds, half for schools and half for various ways of targeting affordable housing goals. And affordable housing goals don't always mean new construction. I think a lot of people think deed restricted or, 20% affordable, talking about AMIs and stuff all the time. And we forget that but I think it's worth reinforcing the notion that right in front of us is an enormous population who already are living in reasonably affordable units. And these are our long-term, mostly seniors in this community. And this board, a lot of us as candidates and now as commissioners, and the city, in almost every elected body and almost every commission, has stated over and over again as part of their various mission statements that preserving diversity in our community and enabling people who have contributed, decades of their lives and raised their children here can stay. in the face of uncertainty in housing costs and housing prices, and a recovering economy. Some of the most compelling things we hear about are how even our general adjustments far outpace Social Security increases. 2.9%, for instance, will far surpass Social Security increases for our seniors, and that can be displacing. And as a Meals on Wheels driver, I've met many of these actual individuals. I know them, I've seen them, and I know that they don't have necessarily, a fallback plan. So the last thing we want to see are our seniors who've given communities and their families, decades of effort fall out onto the street. So a couple of quick statistics. I don't think this is going to be a real hard sell, but I just wanted people to be equipped with the information. CC Community Corp of Santa Monica builds most of the affordable housing in this area and has over the years. They've lost their RDA development dollars. That was from the state as a result of the economic downturn. There are 6,000 people on the waiting list for CCSM housing. There are currently 1,700 units under CCSM management serving 4,000 people. So 1.5 times the number of currently served people are waiting to be served. I hate to think that some of those are evicted or owner evicted or construction evicted or ELLIST people who go to the top of the list but who are waiting nonetheless. This is according to a presentation, by the way, this data I'm giving that CCSM gave to the Housing Commission as part of the Housing Trust Fund conversation. Each new unit, whether it's constructed or purchased and then rehabbed, costs between $450,000 to $650,000 per unit to acquire or build. And a lot of that was due to land scarcity and land prices and existing building prices. So while we are raising the money and we do need to build the units, it's going to be a slow and arduous process. Even if we start accumulating housing funds in a housing trust, which we will, and we are, to that goal, we have right in front of us the opportunity at a much lower cost and a much quicker outcome to preserve existing affordable units right now. And they're not affordable because they're restricted affordable. They're affordable by their nature. Because they are rent controlled and because someone who is a long-standing member of our community is already in that unit. There are strict requirements to be in this program. There are big asks of the people who are in this program. They are required to take full advantage of all services available to them to help them reduce their load. They have to account for every dime they spend voluntarily on everything. I mean, on every last thing in their budget. So it's incredibly invasive in a good and bad way, right? It's incredibly thorough. It's incredibly transparent and vetted. City Council has also heard about this program multiple times and agreed to fund the pilot program, but they're about to hear this summer first steps towards further scaling it up and to what extent. So my gut feeling on this is that we as a board have a big voice in supporting this program and in supporting the boots on the ground details. Our agency is poised more than most, and us as board members more than most, to attest to how quickly and efficiently and directly people today who are not yet on this 6,000 person waiting list don't ever have to get on it if we can help them. And I think that is a absolutely attainable goal in the not in the short run, in the immediate term. So the Housing Commission is going to be asking Council to approve limits, upper limits on the funding for this today versus what we put into a housing trust fund for future construction or acquisition. So in my mind, it should be a multi-pronged attack as to how we preserve diversity and provide affordable housing in this community. And one of those assets are the units sitting right in front of us that we already have. So let's keep people off of that waiting list for CCSM housing. Let's keep people in their homes, and let's help them pay for the general adjustments that we impose upon them. So let's do that together. Any commentary you guys have? We do not need to set a dollar amount proposal at this time because that's up to council and the Housing Commission to work out. But what I'm requesting, at least for my part, and hoping to get consensus, is that we advance something that strongly and robustly supports rapid and immediate expansion of the pod program up to appropriate limits. Thank you. Commissioner Flora.
Well, Madam Chair, your passion is clear and appreciated. You're somebody who's worked with seniors, you know what they're going through, and I think just to reiterate for our throngs of viewers out there, the Preserve Our Diversity program is a rent subsidy. We are asking for support to subsidize current renters. And I will say, if anybody has a problem with that because they say, well, some of these people have the lowest rents in town, Commissioner Foster pointed out the fact that our general adjustment alone is outpacing some of the COLAs, cost of living adjustments, that Congress is approving for Social Security. So our, formula has produced a general adjustment that is putting at risk seniors who we want very much to age in place. And that's very much one of the, I think, goals of many communities is to make sure seniors can age in place. And so given the fact that you mentioned that the city council is taking input now, deciding what they should do about it, I by all means think we should be putting our hat in the ring with an exclamation point on it and saying absolutely the Santa Monica Rent Control Board supports this funding to increase to whatever levels they possibly can increase them. In fact, if you and I don't think this takes away from Commissioner Torosis, but if you would like one of us to move the item, I certainly would be happy to do so right now. And then we can second and then discussion.
I can just you don't need to make a motion.
Okay.
There just has to be a consensus, and I will. If
Okay.
there is a consensus, then at the next meeting I will prepare a resolution for you to vote on.
Oh, okay, great. Well, then I'll wrap up and let Commissioner Torosis speak simply by saying, I think this program is important. I think that it's got to be an all of the above approach. We cannot build fast enough. And by the way, building a new unit doesn't do anything for a senior who's already happy in the unit that they have. They need rental assistance to stay. That's how bad it's gotten. Even if they're living under original rent control, some expenses are just astronomical. Not to mention the healthcare increases that they and all of us of all ages are having to deal with. So, thank you very much, Chairwoman Foster, for bringing this up. I second your urging for us to do this, and I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Commissioner Torosis.
Okay. Yes, similarly, thank you for bringing this to us. I obviously think this is important. I think it's a no-brainer. I have a slightly different approach. I don't know if it's possible that we could get additional information, because I think that we need to take a little bit more nuanced of an approach than to just say, yes, let's fund this to whatever level we can. I don't know that I'm comfortable with just saying carte blanche, do this. I think that we have a limited pool of money with GS and GSH, albeit I think it's a lot. I don't know. I mean, I wish that Chair Soloff were here to give us a presentation, because I think I'm certainly going to go back and ask him some questions. But I want to know, like, annually speaking, what are we anticipating in getting from GS and GSH? What percentage of that is being allocated to the Preserve Our Diversity program? And what's like the annual cost per tenant that we're preserving? And then also, oh, okay. And then because I just want to say this, and again, not to take away from my total 100% support, but there's a limited pool of money, and I do think that it's a multi-pronged solution. But at a certain point, you're giving money to a tenant in a unit that already exists, and potentially taking that from constructing additional units. So that's just my not hesitation, but I just want to know, like, what are we getting for the money that we're investing in this? Like, how many people are we preserving versus with that same amount of money, how many units would you be subsidizing to be built in new construction at a deed restricted amount, that are deed restricted for affordable housing at a certain amount of AMI, certain percentage of AMI. So I don't know if it's possible to get that information, or if that's not within our purview, you might say. But I mean, of course I support this. There's consensus 100%, but I think that I don't think I've ever had them come here and give us a presentation. And I actually believe I've asked for it a few times, as to how the Preserving Our Diversity program is going, who exactly is getting this subsidy. We say we want to, increase the funding. Okay, so increase to what amount?
I think if I...
Oh, wait, I'm not done. And then to assist the severely rent-burdened seniors. Okay, if we're increasing funding, should we expand the population of people that we're helping to potentially disabled or other people with limiting circumstances who are in rent-controlled apartments? I just feel like there are a few things I would like ironed out.
So, well, before you do, and certainly everyone's got some information here. So over the course of a year, there have been numerous public hearings at Housing Commission and at City Council where they talked about the details. There are 4,000 plus units in Santa Monica in rent-controlled households who currently qualify because they are 30% of AMI or lower, and they already spend 50% or more of their income on rent. 4,000 households. The pilot program, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, enrolled about 330 or how many units? How many were in the
44.
pilot?
I think there are like 44 or 47. We assisted them by including a flyer about this in our summer mailing, so it went to all tenants when they were seeking people who were interested in participating. So that they got a response from that of maybe 300 to 400. As you said, it demands a lot of information. The participants have to open, all of their financial information. When it got down to it, there were a limited number that would be eligible for the pilot program. And as I said, I think it's 44 or 47 people.
And they limited the pilot program budget to such that it only accommodated a small number of people.
Yeah. Well, they also took, they wanted to look not just at their housing costs, but all of their other costs as well. You said they have to explain when they
medical
spend
bills
anything.
and
they
groceries and
all,
gas. And
right. There's
everything,
a term for it, which
everything.
I can't think of now,
yeah.
but it's there's, and UCLA developed this index that looks at all of these costs. And so the Housing Division and Economic Development has been working very hard to develop this program. We have right now a full meeting in June with the public hearings, and potentially code enforcement and building and safety coming to talk to us. July might be a good opportunity for us to ask the Housing Commission to come and give us. You said the council's going to talk about this.
It's
later.
Tentatively, might be by the end of June.
Oh, by the end of
that
June.
They're speaking on, but that's subject to change.
Can they give us some written materials potentially?
Yeah, I can see what they have available.
idea.
I can ask the Housing Division.
I want to reiterate, I'm in full support of this. I just want to make sure that we're making an informed decision about how much money we want, much more of a limited amount we want to dedicate to this, and what.
You don't admit.
No, I know we're not. I know, but sorry. If I'm making a recommendation, I want it to be an informed recommendation. I don't feel like I'm fully informed. Maybe that's my own fault. Yet.
So the other caveat I would add before the rest of staff contributes is that they did look carefully at populations that they would attempt to serve, and they decided to. After much deliberation, choosing the AMI percentage and the percentage of income spent on rent. It ended up being a lot of seniors. The one of the requirements is that you lived in your unit on or before January 1st of 2000. There were numerous. They went through gazillions of potential models of who they would serve. So that's something that we could ask for informational data on. Also, the ask that the Housing Commission proposed to council that's in front of them, there was talk of up to $6 million a year, all the way down to much less, and they recommended and voted on and recommended $2 million of the possible GSH and GS funds available per year be allocated, and that was the official recommendation of the Housing Commission, and that there's an argument as to whether you cover 500, the target was 500 households or 1,000 households at a higher limit. So out of the 4,000 who qualify just on their face, the program could be expanded from the 44 that they found to participate in the pilot program up to a possible 500, I believe, at that level of funding. So
2 million?
2 million.
Wow.
So our and 2 million could handle, I believe, and I could be incorrect, 500 units, whereas 450,000 to 650,000 per unit, $2 million would get 4 units, of new construction. So I'm just saying, it appears to be that if the economics make sense, that preserving something now. So again, it's not up to our body in any way, shape, or form to dictate numbers or levels, which is why I purposely was trying to keep it vague, general support for expansion of the pod program from the pilot program on up to whatever council deems through their analysis are the relevant amounts. That'll be voted on by council. I just wanted to generally recommend that they do move forward with the program because it has had positive results and impacts so far. Commissioner Trost?
Yeah, no, I support that. I would love to hear about some of the positive impacts, and I would welcome a presentation even after. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and Mr. Lewis, did you have anything to add? Did you have any other statistics or data?
I did, but I have something to add, but I don't need to know.
Okay.
So. Wait, I'm happy to hear it. I was just really going to, Chair Foster's already said basically what I was going to say, that as a matter of comity, not comedy, I've made that that lack of clarity before. Just as it would be offensive to the board for the Housing Commission or Planning Commission or something to tell the board you should adopt this particular regulation that we've written for you, the board, of course, would never do that to another body and say this is the amount that you should pick. So the resolution that I would draft would be a general expression of support for the program, and specifically for moving beyond the pilot program, but not going into specific amounts or recommending anything of that kind, because that is not appropriately within the board's purview. And that's already been said. So,
and I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. It's more that we lend our expertise to the credence that there is a benefit to preserving tenancies, which is part of our agency's mission statement. Yeah. So it's part of our mandate in the charter is to preserve existing tenancies. So it was simply an expression of support, and I can completely understand wanting to know more about what you would be supporting. That makes total sense, of course. So maybe during the discussion that we have based on the resolution that would be brought back, if we all agree to bring something back, perhaps there could be enough information gathered written by then, if not able to fit something on the agenda as a speaker, or we could ask someone to be brief.
I'm sorry, I will say one more thing that I was going to say that I forgot. This is in some ways like last month when the board expressed support for state bills. I mean, in this case the bill hasn't been drafted, but it's an expression of yes, it's an expression of support for an idea that of course will change as it goes through the future process.
Commissioner Tarosis.
Oh, I'm in consensus. I had another thing I wanted to say after this was over.
Well, this is the end of the agenda, so if it's on this topic.
Yeah, so speaking of the legislative agenda, I see that we don't...
That is not on this topic.
No, not on this topic. No. Sorry, next topic.
Sorry.
Next topic.
So that seems to indicate consensus. We will look at a resolution returning. All right. Thank you for that, and thank you to everyone for a quick and tidy meeting.
I have one more
sorry,
thing.
a board member can ask a question.
Yeah, I have another thing.
Board can't take action.
No, I know. Also, I thank you for the updates in the interim on the legislation. Would love to see us taking more positions per my discussion last time, but because we can't take a position unless you bring it to us, would be happy to see bills every meeting. In that vein, I would like to place a discussion item, because I didn't get it to you in time, that we consider taking a support position on the $4 billion bond that's going to be on the November ballot for the Veterans and Affordable Housing Act that resulted from SB 3. I neglected to ask for that last time. Thanks. And yes, fully support SB 3. Everyone go vote.
Agreed. All right. That's it. We are adjourned. Or no, sorry. Do my two fellow quorum.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Now we're adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Lonnie, do you want to give these back to us? Do you want to take them and give them back? Oh, okay.
Oh, I wrote on mine.
Yeah, that's why write your name.